thinking about a bike, it's about it's the quality of the bike. You will need to think about the materials and the craftsmanship and all the things that go together with the bike.
Hey, bro, I think they're from Utah.
What?
Fezzari's from Utah.
Are you kidding me?
Not Italy.
Let's do that one again.
You know, it's kind of funny. I don't necessarily envy somebody who's in the market to buy a new bike right now. Yeah, there's a ton of options, but at the same time, there's a ton of options, and that makes things very difficult for a lot of people. And in the position I'm in, I get asked a ton of questions about different bikes and what bikes should I buy. Here's what I bring it back to. There's need and there is want. And you have to balance those two things. I have a garage full of 7, 8, 9, 10. There's a bike in there that's $11,500. I don't feel like I need that bike. It's kick-ass and I dig riding it, but I think it comes back to who are you? What are your financial means and what makes the most sense for where you're riding or where you want to ride? And when I had the opportunity to get this bike right here, the Fezzari Delano Peak, I was very interested in seeing what is the lowest build spec that Fezzari has. And when I talked to Tyler from Fezzari, he said, so you really want to go with the lowest build spec? And I said, yeah, because I think that's the most realistic. So if you're out there watching, that's great if you can buck up and get one of the higher price builds. I mean, even at its highest, this bike is $6,500. But this one right here, it's $3,500. And I have been absolutely ripping every trail here in Northwest Arkansas on this bike. And the reason is, I want you to understand, you don't have to spend all that money, you certainly can. But this bike right here for $3,500 has blown me away. So what is this bike? I'm sure if you're watching this, you probably have a decent idea. It's a trail bike. There's no shortage of trail bikes. There's a lot of them, and what does trail bike mean? You know, I think trail bike for me is something kind of right there in the middle. 130-ish rear, 140, 150-ish front. This one's 135 millimeters rear travel, and it's 150 up front. So this is a bike that I appreciate. I like this level of bike because I think it's really good all around, especially here. Now I want you to understand, what I'm gonna tell you right now is my experience with this bike. It's nobody else's experience. It's not tainted by anything. I live in Northwest Arkansas. There's a very specific set of trails in Northwest Arkansas, and I have ridden the majority of those. So you're gonna get my input today based on all these trails. Now, I got this bike, I was very excited. I'm not the most mechanically inclined, but after going through Fezzari's 23-point system, basically they took every measurement I could imagine and really dove deep to get the bike dialed in. And it was kind of cool to go through that whole process like any normal customer would. The bike shows up, first thing you noticed, the box is huge. So as I pulled the bike out, I set a timer because I recorded it. It took me about 12 minutes to put this bike together, which that's saying a lot because I'm not the best with the tool set. So once I got it together, I made a few adjustments. Now, part of that 23-point process is Fezzari really dials the bike in for who you are and what you want. I am 5'10" on a good day and I am on a large. This large has a 50 millimeter stem. I chose the 50 millimeter because I wanted a little bit more length in the cockpit with this thing. Now, give some context. At the Sedona Mountain Bike Festival, I jumped very quickly on a LaSalle Peak, and I didn't mesh really well with that bike because I think the stem was just too short. Part of it was I came off a bike that was very different, and the LaSalle, pretty slack, especially for me, super steep seat tube angle, so it was just kind of awkward. With this bike, yeah, the seat tube angle's still very steep, but it's a little bit more relaxed in comparison. And this thing has a 65-degree head angle, which is pretty much at the bottom of what I'm comfortable with. I don't like bikes that are super slack. So going a 50 mil helped me open it up a little bit more. Another thing I did was I rolled the bars all the way forward. So I think it's important to understand I got a decent amount more length out of the bike just by rolling the bars forward, because they have a big rise and they have a big sweep. So once I got the bike all set up with the controls where I wanted, I went out and spun it up and down the street just to bed the brakes in, and then realized that was already done because Fezzari builds it and tests it and does all that stuff for me. So then it was time to hit the trail. I went and hit some of the stuff that I'm used to at the top of All American, and I just felt good on this thing. It worked really well. It was very snappy, it was very poppy, it was very playful. And one of the things I noticed very quickly was I've never been able to manual easier on a bike than I have with this. I rode from my house, ripped through Lawrence Plaza, and immediately came into All American and manualed almost the whole top of it. I was absolutely shocked. Now, chainstay length, 435 millimeters. It's not like they're any shorter than some of the other bikes I've been on. It's just something about it, it makes it work. And it's funny because what that highlighted to me was numbers aren't the end all be all. You can look at the numbers, you can obsess over the numbers. You need to ride the bike. If I looked at these numbers, I'd think, man, a seat tube angle like that and a head angle, it may not work. This bike, it just works. It felt rad, it felt fun, and it was funny because in my mind a lot of the time was, take it easy, man, this is a $3,500 bike. It's not ready for the thunder that you're gonna bring. I kept bringing that thunder, and the more I brought it, the more the bike was happy with it. So let's talk about some of the places that I've ridden. Again, there's no super long, gnarly, chunky descent here in Northwest Arkansas, but there's some stuff that's fun. Fast, flowy, the bike loves that stuff. There's never any issue with that. I've had zero issue, but we've also hit some big stuff. So I did a video on family flow. Nobody seemed to realize I was on this bike. There was a spot where it was a 34-foot gap, and I blasted it on this thing and had no issues. Now keep in mind, I'm about 185, maybe 90 pounds with the bagel consumption I've been having lately. I'm a bigger dude and I ride hard, and this bike, it didn't have any issues with any of that. So the jump lines were fun. I could get all whipped on this thing, but ripping through trails that are fast and have small little switchbacks, it's fun. The bike's really, really nimble, and it's easy to put it wherever you want. You can pop it up over stuff. I've been having a blast on it. I'm really, really digging it. Now, let's talk spec. Okay, $3,500. What the hell does $3,500 get you? Well, get you a pretty solid package with this bike right here. This is the comp version. So it's got an SLX 12-speed. I've been really impressed, I have to say it. I had XT 12-speed. I rode some XTR 12-speed. It worked well, but it was just very different than the SRAM bikes that I had been used to riding. This, man, I don't know. It worked well. And I don't know, is it a mindset thing? Was it me going in thinking, oh, it's low-level SLX, it's not gonna be that good? I've had no issues at all with how this bike has shifted. It's also got the lower level Dior brakes, which have been very good. Now, one thing I've never, ever been on is DVO suspension. And this is what I was probably most curious about when I talked to Tyler at Fezzari and he told me that the comp build came with DVO. I thought to myself, man, $3,500 in DVO suspension. I know little about it, but I've heard people tell me the stuff is really good. So it was kind of shocking that it would come on a bike at this price point. Again, Fezzari sends the bike completely set up with the info I gave them. So I wanted to test how good that info was and how good their setup was. So I went out and I ripped it without touching anything. I literally have not touched anything on this bike in regards to setting. So if you look at that, that's pretty rad to think that a company can do that by just talking to me on the phone and taking some of my weights. I have made a few changes with rebound. So I've backed out 2 clicks of rebound damping, both front and rear. And that's one of the things that I think you're gonna play with a little bit if you get this spec. The other thing that's really cool is the OTT, or the off the top setting that this DBO fork provides you. So it lets you make an adjustment to make it a little bit more supple or a little bit firmer on the top. So if you're either a heavier rider or a lighter rider, or you just hammer, that's something that you're gonna play around with. And I found that to be pretty cool, and it actually makes a fairly distinct difference. Now, wheels. These are WTB wheels with the bare pawl hubs. This was the biggest question I had with this bike coming in. We talked about it a little bit, and there are upgrade options. You have two upgrade options. You can go all the way up to NV carbon wheels if you want. I don't think that's a necessity, and quite honestly, I'm standing in front of you, having ridden this bike for 2 months, and I haven't had any issues with the wheels at all. Now, I do think I'd have a little bit more fun with a better wheel set. So for me, what I'd probably do is an Industry 9 1-to-1 with a little bit wider rim profile. So I'd be another, I don't know, I think $780 or so in that wheel set, and I'd be perfectly happy. Again, these wheels work very well, and I think for the majority of riders who are gonna be buying this bike, I think they would do okay, especially if you're not used to anything else. Part of it is the engagement. So there's a lot of movement before this thing engages, and being used to the i9 wheels, it's just a little bit unnerving for me. A few of the other things to think about, I only have one bottle cage on here, but you can literally put 3. So you can roll 2 right here, which is absolutely awesome, because I've done some big rides, and it's funny because I didn't even realize, I didn't even think to put an extra bottle cage on, but I rode from my house and hit the newer Little Sugar trails here. I think it was a 47-mile ride, and I had a couple bottles with me, obviously, but the bike ate it up. So that's one thing that I've noticed personally about this bike is it's a very broad use range. From a 46-mile ride to absolutely going as big as I can here at Cease and Desist, which are probably the biggest jumps in this area. And in between is just absolutely hammering it as hard as I can on some of the rougher trails here. So this bike, it's done very well. I've been stoked to be riding it, and one of probably the best parts is to engage with people. A lot of people aren't familiar with the Fezzari brand. Very small consumer direct company out of Utah. Really cool group of people. Everybody I've interacted with has been rad, and I've been excited to interact with people on the trail to see this bike. And of course you throw out, what do you think something like this costs? And everybody's like, oh, I don't know, man, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000. And when I tell them this bike starts at $3,500, they're pretty impressed. So this bike definitely has a lot to offer. Geometry-wise, it's right there on par with every other trail bike. Huge dropper insertion. So I'm running the standard X Fusion 150 mil on this bike. You can go at 200. So for another, I think $140, you can get a 200 millimeter P&W on this thing, which if you're a little bit taller rider, man, I think that would serve you very well. I've been happy with this. Again, 5'10", about a 31 inseam. The large just feels right for me and my riding style. So that's something that you're gonna have to look into. If you're right there, 5'9", 5'10", maybe 5'11", I like the large, but you need to think about, is a medium maybe a better choice for you? It's gonna depend. Are you ripping some high-speed trail? I'd probably go large. If you're looking for more technical stuff, slower speeds, things like that, medium might suit you well. All right, there you go. The all-new Fezzari Delano Peak. Quite choice. I've been ripping this thing for 2 months here in all of the finest Oz trails, which as you've seen, and we got chunky rock gardens, we have ripping fast flow trails. We even have a super legit dual slalom track right over there. So really good cross section. I mean, I've been able to ride this bike on all sorts of different terrain, all sorts of different rides, XC, trail style, and even ripping some big jumps. The only thing I haven't been able to do is take it to the mountains and ride some longer, sustained, chunkier descents. So I can't speak to what it'll do there, but for everything I've ridden, it's been awesome. You know, keep coming back to it, for a bike that's $3,500, I almost just want to throw that out because it's just a rad bike. I'm not riding it thinking, oh man, this is really good for a $3,500 bike. It works very well. The drivetrain, the brakes, I'm absolutely blown away by the DVO suspension. It is awesome. It's worked very well, set up how Fezzari set it up for me out of the box. So moving forward, I'm gonna play around a little bit with that, see if we can make some adjustments, if it goes better, if it gets a little worse. I don't know, just gonna keep riding. I can tell you for damn sure, they're not getting this thing back. So it's been a solid package. I mean, 135, 150, that is a realm of bike that I think makes sense for the majority of people. You know, what does this compete with? You know, for me and what I've ridden, probably the Switchblade, very similar, a little bit more playful, I think. This thing, a little more nimble, certainly confidence inspiring. I can manual the holy heck out of it, which I don't even know why. Chainstay length is the same. I can't put my finger on why, but it works well, and I've dug it. So very solid experience. So I went through everything a customer would go through buying one of these bikes, and I have to say that I'm impressed. So all good things to say about the Fezzari Delano Peak. Hopefully this helped. You know, if you have any questions, shoot them down below and let me know. The idea is for me to convey to you who I am as a rider and what I've done with this bike, so I hope I've done that. Also, let me know if there's other bikes you want to see me on. It was rad of Fezzari to reach out and say, hey man, we love what you're doing. We'd love for you to ride it and see what you think. So I'm in this to ride as many bikes as I can because I ride for you, the viewer. So check out the behind the scenes. We got some other cameras running here, the GoPro's running. You'll see everything that happened on Instagram at The Rich Drew. If you're not already a subscriber, click the link below and click the bell because we have some more how-tos coming. We're trying to balance, you know, how-tos, trail checks, bike reviews, all that good stuff. Last but not least, the Patreon link is there. We love some support through Patreon, and we are getting ready to launch the Shopify and the Amazon for the RD shirts, hats, and all that other swag. So, man, I'm drenched. Like, I literally could probably wring my shirt and my gloves out. So I'm gonna go find some frozen bottles of Scratch and get rehydrated, and hopefully watch as Brock edits this radness. So we're out of here. Man, it's been a long time. I almost forgot. I haven't said this in a long time. Peace out, dumpers.